Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I think we've got a couple of other folks that are coming into the waiting room. So we're going to give everybody just a minute and then we'll get started. All right, it looks like we've got everyone here. So why don't we go ahead and get started? Be really mindful of folks' time. My name's Kelli Rodriguez, and I'm the Assistant Dean for Academic Affairs. And in that capacity at Seattle University School of Law, I oversee our Master of Legal Studies program. And I'm super excited to have our financial aid guru here, and I'm going to let Lynette introduce herself in a minute. We've seen lots and lots of changes in financial aid space, so we thought it was kind of timely to have a quick introduction around how, assuming you want to pursue your master's in legal studies, how do you go about doing that under this new landscape of financial aid? So Lynette, if you could quickly introduce yourself, I'd love that.
Hi, I'm Lynette Splinter, and I'm the Director of Student Financial Services here at Seattle University School of Law. And I have been doing this for a great number of years. So I've seen quite a few of the changes, from the time of adding more unsub to adding the Grad Plus to now the Sunset program, sunsetting of that. So it's always been changes in financial aid. But this year it's definitely been quite a few. So we'll talk a little bit about that and how that impacts you. We Our office is dedicated for our law students and our law grad programs. So there are three of us, myself, our assistant director, Natasha Murphy, and our program coordinator, Jasker and Cower. And so you may end up talking to any one of us if you call in or if you email us. Um, and our phone number is 206-398-4250. Or email is lawfa, LAWFA, at seattleu.edu.
I'm
And
putting
we're
all
happy
this in the
to
chat.
chat with you.
I'm putting all this in the chat so you all have that. So let's see, I'm going to stop sharing for the purposes of our conversation, and then I'll make sure that we get some of this information in the chat so folks have it. I think, yeah, a great place to start is what sort of services do you all provide for students? So when we've got prospective students that will often call you, admitted students, students who are matriculated or already pursuing their degree, how do you support them? In what sort of ways do you offer support?
So we are, and I do want to just make a note. There's our office, Student Financial Services, and then we also have a business office. So we work closely with them. But when we're talking in terms of billing for tuition and dispersing funds, that comes through the business office. So our process is to award financial aid. So if you're applying for financial aid, such as the unsubsidized loan or private loans, we're doing that awarding and processing. If you're admitted and you receive a scholarship, that also becomes part of your financial aid package. So we're making sure that that information gets on your award so that it can be dispersed in time to cover tuition and then living expenses. Um, so that's the basic part of it. What we also provide is one-on-one counseling. So if you have questions specifically to your financial aid process or wanting to know maybe what types of aid you're eligible for, we can set up a time to either meet in person, via Zoom, over the phone, to go over that a little more in depth. And then once you're here as a student, it's kind of continuing that process. So, what are you planning for the next year or for graduation, and making sure everything is in order. And then even post-graduation, we have students always contact us to ask a question like, I'm not sure on my servicer or, how I get this information, and we can at least provide you the resources or direct you to that space. So it's I would say whole process from the initial um, evaluating a financial aid file, awarding, to a full-on discussion of what that financial aid looks like for you and how you want to plan that out for your program.
Awesome. So maybe we'll start with kind of like the easiest one. The one has not changed. And I'm happy to kind of review scholarship process real quick. So as a part of a financial aid package, students may be eligible for scholarships when they apply to the Master of Legal Studies program. Our scholarships are a part of, or this application for the scholarships is a part of the regular application. There's a different prompt if you want to apply for scholarships. Students are evaluated kind of on everything, right? So your transcripts, your job history, all of the things involved with kind of your application. And you'll be informed of your scholarship at the time of admission. So when you get your admission letter, it will let you know if you've received a scholarship. And we communicate that then to our financial aid office. So when they are dispersing your loans, your scholarship is included in that, and they send that on to the business office. So that's deducted directly from your tuition. So I'm not sure if there's any other things that I should highlight there with respect to scholarships, Lynette, that you see on your side.
No, I think the big part of it, yeah, I'm trying to think of anything else. I think maybe one of the things too that comes into question is if a student ends up taking more credits and graduating early, the impact on a scholarship. So I don't know if you wanted to how
Yeah,
that would affect.
I can definitely speak to that. The credit minimums vary a little bit depending on which programs. We've got a Master of Legal Studies that's fully online, our compliance and risk management program that requires a minimum of 5 credits per term to maintain your scholarship eligibility. And our on-campus programs, so Master of Legal Studies in general studies, technology, health, and sports, all require a minimum of about 8 credits for full-time. You can dip into part-time, and then we kind of readjust your scholarship a little bit from there. So it's a little bit case by case, but yeah, if you're dipping below 5 credits, that might impact your scholarship. So why don't you take us into the world of loans and what that looks like?
All right. And and I will say, going to halftime status may impact loans. We're not entirely sure how that proration is going to work. That is something that is being decided from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. So I'll talk a little bit about that. But one thing that hasn't changed for you in this program, if you are eligible for federal student aid, so you've completed a FAFSA, and you've met the criteria for that, you are eligible for the unsubsidized Stafford at the current rate, 20,500 is the annual maximum. So in both of the MLS and the MLS online programs, you would be eligible for that 20,500. So that doesn't change, and that should be an eligibility for your program. So there are some new limits, although it shouldn't impact that part of it. So you should have that 20,500 for each year, or up to that. So if you start in a spring term instead of a fall term, if that cost of attendance is and minus the scholarship is under 20,500, that your max would be that cost of attendance. So, and what we look at for cost of attendance is not only tuition and fees, but housing and food, transportation. They're all items that must be included in a student cost of attendance, but it doesn't mean that you have to actually borrow that much. So you can choose to borrow only to cover the direct cost, which is your tuition and fees. But you can also opt to borrow funds to help with your indirect cost, housing and food. And that's what that budget does. It allows you to have that option if you need to. Then the second part goes into for all students going into a new program that begins on or after July 1, 2026. The Grad Plus program has been sunsetted. So it's not, students are not eligible for Grad Plus anymore. So then that comes down to the private loan funds. And that would be like Sally Mae, SoFi is another one that, our students have used. Citizens Bank. So there's several lenders out there that have student loans. Some are specifically for law programs, others are for grad programs. And they are interest based. I mean, they are the interest does accrue. They are credit based. So it does require a credit check. And rates can vary depending on your credit score. You may also have a cosigner or may require a cosigner option. And if you have excellent credit, you might see that interest rate reflect that. So there could be a variation in that interest rate on those private loans. But those are going to be the two main sources of funding for students coming in into a new program in the next year.
And
So the unsubsidized and private loan.
so for the unsubsidized, it's 20,500, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the cap annually, and that's for 2 years, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so just kind of like to put that in perspective, for the MLS tuition and fees, we're right at about that 20,500, a little bit, if you've got some scholarship money, you'll be under that cap per year. And most of our students finish their program within 2 years. So you're going to be under those caps, and the unsubsidized loan should cover most of the tuition and fees, the direct costs.
Yeah. And then if you're looking at it thinking, okay, I don't want to go into private loans, maybe I just want to take the unsubsidized, and that's going to cover most of it. And then I can pay the rest. We do have with our business office has a payment plan set up so that you can break that payment down into smaller payments and get it paid off within the term. So you would you would request a payment plan for each term, and it would be your amount that you would pay would be the tuition and fees minus any other financial aid. So minus if you received a scholarship, minus the unsub loan, and then that would be the difference that you would pay out of pocket. So that's something that you can also choose to do. You can also choose, if you don't want to take out a loan to start with, setting up a payment plan to pay that off. So there's several different options that you have for financial aid. One of the things that I would say is once you're starting to think about like, okay, how do I finance this? So you've applied, let's say you've received your admission letter, and you're thinking, what are my next steps for financial aid? I would say complete the FAFSA. Even if you're not sure that you want to take out loans, complete the FAFSA. The FAFSA is normally open in October for the next year. Sometimes it's a little bit delayed depending on what they do. Although this year they opened up a little bit later, but not as late as they have in the past. So we usually use around October. They use your prior income, so you should be able to pull that data. So that's the first step. And then the second step that I would say to do is to look at your credit and look at that information that you have. What what credit cards do you have? What amounts outstanding do you have that you can either help to pay down before you get into school? Or checking and making sure that there's nothing on your credit report that shouldn't be there, so that you don't have like any delinquencies, any charge-offs, or sometimes somebody might have got your information and opened a credit card that you didn't do. And this is the time frame to get everything straightened out before you start school, so that later on when you are starting school, if you are going to take out additional loan funds, you've got that credit report as clean as you can get it, so that they're looking at that information and making that decision on it. So those are good ideas to do in that time frame before you get your financial aid offer. And, while you're applying after, and even after admission to get that, to look at that information.
And we often have students reach out to our financial aid team ahead of applying and just to kind of take a look at what things are going to look like in the way of finances and what loans they'll be eligible for, et cetera. I definitely want to make some room for folks to ask questions. If you all are in a place or have questions that are pressing, please feel free to take yourself off mute or raise your hand and I can we can work on addressing those. I'll make sure there's also a Q&A. Yeah, so feel free. I'm wondering if there's anything else that I run into with students around financial aid. Oh, the other thing I might mention is we do have students who work with their employers, right? So many employers will offer tuition reimbursement. So sometimes that means that they will, our business office is very comfortable and works with a lot of employers we send your tuition bill directly to them and they write a check directly to the university. We also have students who have to wait until after they get their tuition bill paid and grades back sometimes, and then they submit reimbursement to their employer. I've often worked with students who have an annual cap on how much the employer will pay. So sometimes we'll work to make sure that they're taking enough credits to stay under that cap so that their employer will continue. And sometimes it means we have to slow down the program or whatever, but all of those things are possible. So let's see. We have got a question about if we start the program prior to July 1st, are we still eligible for a PLUS loan? And my understanding is yes, but I'm going to ask Lynette to answer that.
Yeah. So let's say you were applying for the spring start. Yes. So in that case, you would be considered a legacy borrower. So you started it, and I should say, if you started the program, you applied for financial aid, and you accepted an unsubsidized, a direct loan, so unsubsidized at least, was dispersed prior to July 1, 2026. So
Okay.
it does not have to be a PLUS loan from what we've heard. And I'm going to caveat that from what we've heard, we don't have the final regs yet. But from what Department of Ed has said is that any direct loan, so that would be unsubsidized for in the graduate program or Grad Plus, would count as long as that was in the program that you're in before July 1, 2026. So for any of you that are looking at starting this coming spring, you would be under the legacy program.
And I should note that for the MLS program, it's different for our JD program, but for the MLS program, we have a fall and a spring start. We do not have a summer start in the MLS program. So if you are interested in wanting to make sure that you are eligible for those Grad Plus loans, our spring applications, we're still accepting them. Technically, our deadline is December 8th, so next Monday, but we've got a little bit of wiggle room there. So if you are not yet sure and not quite finished up with everything, please feel free to reach out and I'm happy to extend that deadline for you so we can get you into our spring application pool. Any other questions? That was a really good question. Thank you for that. Anything that you're hearing a lot from students or prospective students, Lynette, that might be helpful?
I think the big thing is that is a good question. That is one that we hear a lot of. So for our JD program for law students, there is a summer program. So that's come up. And because, any school that has an established program or you've established before, there shouldn't be any questions with that.
Yeah.
So starting in the spring for the MLS, MLS online is fine. I mean, you would have that. We're still trying to, one of the things that I mentioned before was halftime proration. And it's something now that it used to affect only undergrads, and now it affects grad students who are half-time. So that it prorates the loan disbursement for that term. There's still a lot of questions about that, but something to keep in mind that it may reduce your loan disbursement in a term if you are less than full-time.
Okay.
But I, there's still a lot of questions on that. So hopefully in January we will have they've reached consensus in the for proposed rulemaking with the Department of Ed. So we know that they have regulations that hopefully they will be publishing in January. It allows time for comments and to make any changes. So spring is about the time that they figure those final regs will be out and will go into effect in July. So there's going to be a very short window to
Yeah.
get everything up to date. And by then we should know more on the proration part of it. So I don't have much on how that's going to calculate or how that will affect, but it is something to kind of keep in the back of your mind that if later on you're thinking about dropping below those credits that Kelli articulated, the 5 for the MLS online, 8 for the MLS program, that would be something that you'd want to talk with us. It's probably not going to be your first term. That's more subsequent. And by then we'll have a better idea of how that will affect you. But just that kind of comes into question too, of
Yeah.
how that's going to affect.
Well, it's a really great overview. I know there's so many questions still to answer, and we're all kind of, waiting for regulations to, and clarifications to be sent out. But I really, really appreciate your time. And certainly for those of you who are able to join us today, feel free to reach out if you have other questions. I am going to put up just a couple of slides real quick. With some just final kind of summary details. So our application deadline for spring 26 is December 8th. If you have any questions about that, we still do have scholarship funds available. We are still awarding scholarship money. So if you are interested in applying for that spring timeline, get your application in. Email me if you have any questions. I'm happy to help. Our classes this spring start on January 20th, so a little bit later. You get a little bit longer break to this year. And my information is here. I also will reiterate the contact information for our financial aid office. So Law FA, as in Law Financial Aid, Law FA at seattleu.edu is their email address, and their phone number is 206-398-4250. And that will get you into whoever's available earliest to chat with you about financial aid. So thank you so much, Lynette, for your time. I really, really appreciate it. For those of you who are able to join us, please feel free to reach out if you have any other questions.
And I just want to say one
Yeah.
other thing too, for students who are worried with private loans. I think sometimes there's like what's my interest rate going to be? We do have students who have decided that the private loan is the best option for them. And in some cases, they've got lower interest rates than they did on a Grad Plus, or they're not going to do public interest work. And so the terms of the loan. So we have a listing on our website for alternative loans. That is a great comparison. So there's a link if you go under the loan section in for student financial services. That gives you a comparison. So for those of you that would not be eligible for the Grad Plus, there are some really good private lenders out there. And I would just say, as you're looking at them as a possibility, is really look at it, do a comparison, and just make sure that the terms are kind of the best ones. I think like anything else, and especially as we're in this change, is that we might see some more more questionable ones coming into this frame and offering loans or offering services that are probably not going to be a benefit. And if you have any questions or anything, reach out to us because we can look at that information and provide you with that and provide you with resources to figure out what questions do I need to ask? What are the best options for me?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That's really good. My I ended up refinancing because I was able to get a much better interest rate privately. So yeah, they are out there. Um, well, I don't see any other questions either in the chat or in the Q&A. So happy to let you all go on with your afternoon. But thank you again so much, Lynette. I really, really appreciate your time and your support of our students. And
Thank you.
certainly feel free to reach out to me if you have any other questions. Thanks, everyone.